met one person in the history of the world, and it was 2 weeks ago when I met them at this camp, that actually likes moving, all right? Because so many different things can go wrong when you move. I mean, really, you can drop a box, you can forget your stuff, like you can lose one of your kids. I mean, it's a tough thing when you move. And we had all kinds of obstacles when we moved. I mean, we got too much stuff, first of all, right? A little bit of background on me. There's myself. There's all the personalities that live inside of me. There's my wife. I have 5 kids, and we have 2 dogs, okay? And one of those is a Labradoodle, so he's confused about who he is already. And anytime that we leave town, pretty much to go anywhere, it's kind of like Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. I mean, it's just like there's stuff, and there's animals, and there's like people doing weird stuff, and it's just a big deal. So when we're moving the other day, pack all of our stuff into the truck, then we realize it's not going to fit, right? That's one thing. When you have a pair of shoes and your foot doesn't fit into your shoes, you get more shoes. When you have too much stuff and it doesn't fit in the U-Haul, that's a problem. Okay? And we already had a yard sale, try to get rid of a bunch of it, it's a big deal, but now we got to get another U-Haul. So we load up 2 U-Hauls, all my friends are there, get the people from the church, they help us move, we get going. We're like 6 hours behind. Anybody ever been behind? 6 hours? Not good. Not good when you're 6 hours behind. We get, this is no joke, 2 miles down the road. And guess what? The check engine light in the U-Haul comes on. All right? Now, some of you guys are not driving yet, so you're like, who cares? My parents, they handle that. I just sit in the back and play like a game and punch my brother in the head. All right, now people who drive, you know that the check engine light, that's kind of tricksy. Because if it's your car, you're like, who knows, check engine light. Because you know that the mechanic somewhere made that up, comes on, and they like laugh because they're like, they're going to come in, and we're going to charge them $500, and then we're going to tell them it's a sensor, whatever that means. But when you're driving somebody else's ride, especially this like 25-foot truck that's full of all your junk, and you already had to get another one, and the light comes on, and you're like, dude, I don't know. This might be a real problem. It might be a fake problem. I don't know. But the guy at the deal said, I got to call this number if there's a problem with this truck, and there's going to be trouble. So I pull over to the side of the road, call a little number on my phone, and the guy literally says to me, well, I don't know. If it's my car, I'd just keep going. But since it's that big old diesel, it might actually be something. You're going to have to wait. And I was like, all right, here's the deal, bro. We already got 5 kids, 2 dogs, one is confused, all of our junk. We got 2 U-Hauls now at this point. One of them's not rolling. My wife's already ready to leave me. We haven't even left town. This is insane, and you're telling me I gotta wait. Yeah, that's about right. So there we sat. We sat for 45 minutes in this parking lot, all right? Finally, the mechanic shows up. This is not a lie. The guy's name is Harley, all right? Now, I was hopeful because I was like, dude has got like a motorcycle in his first name. Maybe he can come and fix my busted truck. He sits there, he looks at it, he says, I don't think I know what the problem is. I'm thinking this is not good, because neither did the guy on the phone. And now you're here with the mechanic wisdom wizardry, and you don't know what's up. He gets out his computer, plugs it in. Well, it's throwing codes, but it don't tell me what it is. I said, all right. What are we going to do? His plan, this is no joke, his actual plan was to drive my truck around the parking lot and see if it would act up and cause a problem. All right? This is not inspiring confidence in my little life that's already hanging by a thread. He does it, guess what? It won't do it for him. What is this? Why? Why is this happening? Finally, we figure out it's not going to cause the problem, so the best plan we come up with is he's going to follow me down the interstate, okay, in his truck. And if I break down, he's going to help me. Now, I don't know what he was going to do, but it made me feel better, right? I mean, it made me feel a little better that he's going to follow me. Finally, we get out of town. Now we're like 7, 8 hours behind. I have to get to Nashville to buy my house. The next morning, we get all the way out of town. I get 45 minutes down the road. This is no joke. Complete standstill on the interstate, okay? Complete standstill. And usually, if there's like trouble, you feel bad for whatever happened. But you feel a little bit better, at least you know something happened, all right? At this point, we don't know what happened, but this is no joke. The dude in front of me gets out of his Mercedes and starts doing stretches, okay? Stretches. That's how stopped we were on the interstate. The dude in front of me is like working out while I'm about to lose my witness in the big truck that has the check engine light. All right? I sit there, this is no joke, I sit there 45 minutes. Finally we going, and guess what it was? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Complete stop on the interstate, and we could see no problem. I didn't know if maybe there's like a hipster that had come out on a bicycle and he'd been run over while he was selling avocados. I don't know what the problem was. Somebody had come by, they chopped off his man bun, and he wanted to kill somebody. I don't know what the deal was. It was trouble, but apparently it went away before we got there. We get on down the road. This is no joke also. We get stopped again. Guess what? This actually was an accident, thankfully not very serious. But while I was sitting in the traffic for the accident, guess what happened next to me? An accident. Okay, I'm sitting in the traffic, and the tractor trailer in front of me backs into the tractor trailer next to me. Seriously. The first one was yellow, the second one was red, and the guy in the red truck was about to beat down the guy in the yellow truck because he backed into him. He came over and he asked me, he said, "Sir, did you see what happened?" I was like, "Bro, I didn't see nothing. Get in the truck. We got to go. We got to keep this thing moving." Actually, I did see it, and I did tell him. But anyway, long story longer. We finally get to Nashville. It's 2:30 in the morning now. Did I mention I'm driving this huge truck? Does anybody know what kind of sound a large truck makes in the middle of the night when you put it in reverse? Yes, that's right. Beep, beep, beep. I pull into my friend Charlie's neighborhood, who I'm staying with. Sweet Charlie, sweet Tanya. They have a sweet baby that's like 6 months old and teething. And I pull into their little driveway, and I realize I'm going to have to back this thing in. So I back it up and beep, 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 all through the night. And finally, I park the truck at 2:40 in the morning. I walk down the stairs, I collapse onto the bed, and I'm dead until the next day. But here's the thing. That's just kind of how life is sometimes, isn't it? That's just kind of how stuff goes. When you're trying to do something, there's always different kinds of opposition. And let me tell you something, friends. We already have pushed into it today. We have talked about what we're here to do. We're here to learn the gospel, and we're here to learn how to proclaim the gospel. And I just want to tell you up front, there's going to be some opposition to that. But I want to give you some help tonight. We're going to be in Acts chapter 17, Acts 17, and we're going to look at one of my favorite passages in the entire Bible when it comes to proclaiming the gospel. And it is Paul in Athens. Now, Paul was probably the second greatest Christian that ever lived after Jesus himself. He used to be a killer, then he became a Christian maker. And this passage gives us 4 principles that I think are absolutely indispensable in helping us move forward with what I want to call tonight and tomorrow night, the proclaiming life. Can you say that with me? The proclaiming life. So that is a life that proclaims the gospel. And I wonder if you could stand with me out of respect for God's word. I would love to read this passage for us. We're going to look at verses 16 to 23 tonight, and then we're going to finish up tomorrow morning. And let's just set our hearts on a course toward learning what God has to say through this passage tonight. Let's hear the word of God. Acts 17:16. It says this. It says, "Now, while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, his spirit was provoked within him when he saw that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the devout persons, and in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. Some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers also conversed with him. And some said, 'What does this babbler wish to say?' Others said, 'He seems to be a preacher of foreign divinities, because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection.' And they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, 'May we know what this new teaching is that you're presenting? For you bring some strange things to our ears. We wish to know, therefore, what these things mean.' Now all the Athenians and foreigners who lived there would spend their time in nothing except telling or hearing something new. So Paul, standing in the midst of the Areopagus, said, 'Men of Athens, I perceive that you are in every way very religious. For as I passed along and observed the objects of your worship, I found an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God. What therefore you worship is unknown, this I proclaim to you.'" That's God's word. Let's pray. Holy Spirit, would you illuminate these texts to us? Help us to understand what it is that you've inspired for us here. Help us to learn and grow in our ability to get the gospel and proclaim the gospel. Lord, help us to focus, help us to pay attention, and help us to be changed on the spot and in the days to come by what we hear tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, thanks, guys. Well, hey, if I could just give you this whole sermon in a sentence, here's what it's going to be. We're going to have 4 points, but they're all going to fall right into this. At the end of the day, I think the proclaiming life is about being open. It's about being open. If you are open to what God is doing in your heart, then you're going to have lots of opportunities open up before you. You see that in Paul's life. Let's chop it up right here, beginning in verse 16. Look at this. It says, "Now, while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, his spirit was provoked within him when he saw that the city was full of idols." Now, there's a lot of ways to do Bible study. I think the best way is to understand passages in their context, all right? You look at what happened before, you look at what happened after, and then you slowly go through the verses themselves and try to understand it. Now, Paul had been on a missionary journey. Now, pretty much his whole life was like missionary journey after missionary journey, which I think is a good example for us because missions is not just a switch that we turn on and off. See, one of our fundamental identities as a Christian is that we are missionaries. We are proclaimers. Look at your neighbor and say, "You are a proclaimer." Now look at your other and say, "Did you know that? Did you know that you're a proclaimer?" All right, so like Paul, like the apostles, like the Old Testament prophets, we are all proclaimers. So he's waiting for his other missionary friends, and while that is happening, something happens in his heart. Now, if you're a Bible circler, I would circle the word provoked. Because that's a strong word. It means that he was not just engaged by what he saw, but he was moved. He was impacted. He was influenced. And what was it that messed with him? It's that he saw that the city was full of idols. Now what city was he in? He wasn't in Versailles. He wasn't in Lexington. He wasn't in Cedarmore. He was in Athens. And Athens is a very special place. Some of you, when you were awake during high school, you remember Athens. It was a great place, a university town where Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, Alexander the Great, Sophocles, Epimenides, all these other guys with tough to pronounce names, real smart dudes, dudettes. They lived in this place. And when Paul would have been there would have been between 30 and 40,000 citizens. And it was a very strategic place because it was a place of density, a lot of people in one spot, but also diversity, a lot of different kinds of people there. So they're all there together at this time of the Pax Romana. That is the Roman peace. So a lot of kind of tranquility at this time. Ideas could be trafficked. And it just so happens in the providence of God that Paul is there between his two missionary journeys at that moment, and he sees this thing that he just can't handle. And it's that the city is full of idols. Now, some people would say that there would be between 30,000 gods plus registered in Athens at the time. So at this time. There was actually one writer who said it was easier to find a god in Athens than a man. And when Paul saw this, he said, "This is not right. Something's going on here." And actually, I think that gives us our first principle almost right off the bat here. That if you want to live a proclaiming life, the first thing you have to do is you have to open your eyes to see what's going on around you. I remember having an experience very similar to this a few years ago. I was in Mexico, in the interior. And I remember we'd been driving forever and came up to this little thing on the side of the road, and there was like this little guard shack for Oompa Loompas. I mean, it was like probably this tall, and I was like, well, I don't know who lives there. And so I kind of got out of the truck and I looked at this thing, and I was like, all right, so there's the statue of the Virgin Mary there, but then there's these other like little statues that I'd never seen before, but you could tell they weren't like yard ornaments. I mean, it was like something. And then there was like a plate of food in front of them. There was like some spices and that kind of thing. And I asked my guy who was there, I was like, bro, what is this? And he said, oh, that's a little house for the idols. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I thought about this passage, and that is exactly what was happening here. See, these people in Athens, as he said in the passage there, they were very religious. They were very spiritual. They were very concerned that they wanted whatever gods that they thought might be out there to be on their side. And they were very geographically powerful. That's what they believed. We'll talk more about this tomorrow night. But yeah, I've been awake for a long time. Their power was very geographically limited. And see, that's kind of what these people in Mexico thought. They were basically saying, look, hey, it's a very Catholic area, but then on top of that, they were just kind of superstitious, and they were just saying, hey, we want to cover like our Catholic base, but then we also want to cover like these indigenous God bases. And so if there's gods out there, we want to kind of keep them happy and hope they keep our kids healthy and that kind of thing. It's the same idea in what Paul saw. And see, when he saw it, that's the second principle here. It did something to him. It shows us that if you want to live a proclaiming life, you also have to have an open heart. You can't just have open eyes, but you have to have an open heart. And see, for most of us that live here in this area, in this region, I know some of you are from other places, it's not as obvious as it would have been for Paul and for us what the idols are. See, our temples filled with other gods, they don't look like Oompa Loompa guard shacks, and they don't look like 30,000 gods in the city of Athens. They look like office buildings where people go to worship their jobs. They look like educational facilities where people can go to worship their education. They look like sports stadiums where people go to worship their own athletic ability and the athletic ability of others. But see, friends, make no mistake, there doesn't have to be a little stone statue for there to be an idol. And friends, even in this room tonight, there are idols. Things that we prize as more important than Jesus and getting his message to others. So the first step toward proclaiming a proclaiming life is to have open eyes to see what's going on, and then an open heart to feel what's going on. So let's stop and ask a couple of questions here. Number one, do you know what the idols are in your town? Do you know what the idols are in your school? The things that separate people from Jesus. Let's ask a deeper question. Do you know what the idols are in your heart that separate you from Jesus? That separate you from proclaiming Jesus to others? See, friends, that's where it all begins. Open eyes, open heart. And then now let's ask another question. Are you moved by what you see? Because here's the thing. I bet most of you here, you already believe in proclaiming the gospel. Most of you here could probably climb right up here on the stage, and I could give you the mic, and you could proclaim the gospel. But here's the problem for most of us. We're not moved by what we see. And I could guilt you into it. I could make you feel really bad about not sharing the gospel. But how about this? How about we just think about how good Jesus is? How about we think about the fact that he stepped out of heaven and he added humanity to his divinity. And that for 33 plus years, he lived an absolutely perfect, sinless life. He never sinned in his thoughts, never sinned in his deeds, never sinned in any of his motives. He was perfectly pure in every way. And then he died on the cross for our sins. The substitutionary atonement. He died for us. And then he rose again to prove that he was God. Friends, as we begin to lay hold of that gospel, it begins to open our eyes. It begins to open our hearts. It begins to warm us up to who he is. And then we begin to have this kind of experience that Paul had. We begin to feel it for ourselves. We understand that the gospel is not just a vitamin that we take to get to heaven. It's what grows us in our spiritual faith. It's what pushes us forward. It compels us. God's love compels us, is what the Bible says. And as that gospel wakefulness begins to take place in our hearts, then we start to see the spiritual state of affairs and decay around us. See, if you really start to get the gospel, it will eventually begin to matter to you that many of the towns you come from have serious meth problems. When your heart gets warm to the gospel, you will start to care about the fact that you look at things on the internet that you really shouldn't. You will start to care that some young lady in your youth group has an eating disorder and is afraid to tell anybody. See, you'll start to look and you'll see, you know what? I see grown-ups that devote their entire lives to chasing after stuff that's eventually just going to rust out and burn away. This is not right. See, when we get our hearts warm to the gospel, we start to have open eyes. We start to have open hearts. And you know what that's going to lead to? It's going to lead to open mouths. See, that's the third thing you got to have. If you want to have a proclaiming life, you got to open your mouth. Look at verse 17. Look at this. It says that he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews. Now, the Jews, those would be people that were kind of already oriented toward God, the religious people of the day. And so he sat down with them, started with what they already knew, and then he proclaimed Jesus to them. But then he also went to the marketplace. That was kind of the shopping center of the day. It was a big building, had a temple on one end, and people would come there and they'd buy junk, but then they would also stand around and talk. So it was like a philosopher's flea market kind of place. And he would proclaim the gospel there because there was a lot of people there. And one thing that was so great about Paul is that he would take the message that never changed and he would change the way he would share it. He would speak it in different ways to different people because he had an open mouth. He was a good missionary. But friends, Paul wasn't magic. We can do this. We can learn how to communicate the gospel in different ways, but I think before we do that, we've got to say just a little bit about why we don't do this in the first place. I mean, again, most of us here, you know, and you know you should, but why don't we do it? I think the bottom line is, we're just afraid. We're just flat afraid. I think some of us are afraid that we don't know what to say. Okay? We're going to help you this week. Your youth leaders can help you. Your small group Bible study leaders, they can help you. But sometimes I think we're afraid of questions that are just not going to come. Well, man, I'm afraid that, like, some guy's going to ask me about, like, aliens and dinosaurs and, you know, I don't know what to say about that stuff. You know what? I've been doing this for a long time. I could probably tell you 3 or 4 stories where I've gotten questions that were just totally out there. It's kind of a phantom fear. So I wouldn't pay too much attention to it. But here's what I think we're really afraid of. I think we're afraid of what people think. The Bible has a category for that. It's called the fear of man. And if you ever just want to do just a word study to talk about how dangerous and unhelpful the fear of man is, I would encourage you to do that. But here's the deal. The Bible also gives you an antidote for being afraid of what other people think. It's called believing what God thinks. And if we can root ourselves in the gospel and realize that the truest thing about us is who we are in Him, then we will begin to care less about what everybody else thinks. Not like going on some crusade and being a freak and then trying to blame it on Jesus. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you really get to the place where Paul was. And you say, look, man, I just get it. I get it. My life is really short. Eternity is really long. And Jesus has sent me to these people. And you get appropriately resized in the gospel. Let me tell you just a couple of things that are true about you if you are in Christ tonight. Ephesians 2:19 says this, so then, you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are fellow citizens with the saints and the members of the household of God. Did you know that? That once you were a stranger and an alien, and now you have been brought in and you are part of God's family? Friends, when you begin to understand that, when you understand that you are a part of God's family, then it's not going to hurt so bad when somebody says, that guy's just being all holy talking about Jesus again. Because the answer is eventually going to be with humility. You know what? I'm not very holy, but man, I know that God is. And he's making me holy a little bit at a time. And out of my fallenness and brokenness, I want to share with you about Jesus, the Holy One who lived and died and rose for you. See, the gospel changes how we think, and it changes how we speak. How about another one here? Galatians 3:26, for in Christ Jesus you are all sons of God through faith. That's not just true for the boys, girls. You're included in that. We're all children of God. But this is my favorite one. 1 Peter 2:9 says this, but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession. And then listen to this. Right in the end of it, it gives us a purpose clause. So all these things are true about you. Chosen race, royal priesthood, holy nation, people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. So these things are true about us in part so that we can proclaim the gospel to people who those things are not yet true of them. So if we root ourselves in the gospel, it will open our eyes, it will open our hearts, and it will open our mouths. So can I ask you a hard question tonight? Can you ask yourself, and in your church group, is this why I don't share? Because I just care too much about what other people think. And can I ask you to do something else for me? Can you believe what the Bible says about you? Because friend, if you do, it's going to change you. And it's going to stir you up. And it is going to help you proclaim the gospel in a way that me guilting you into would never do. Now, there's one more thing in this passage that I love. It comes from 18 to 23. And Paul shows us here, the fourth thing is that if you want to live a proclaiming life, you have got to open your mind. Now let me give a little caveat with this, because sometimes when you say that, you're thinking about all those people who opened their mind so much that their brain fell out somewhere along the way. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about being savvy. We're talking about being sharp. We're talking about being shrewd. And that's what Paul does. Now, it takes a minute, but look how we get here. Verse 18, some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers also conversed with him. So Paul didn't just walk in there and be like, hey, y'all suckers are stupid. Listen to me, because I got the jam for you, all right? He didn't do that, and that would have been weird. He walked up, and he started talking to him, and he conversed with him. And these were not idiots that he was talking to. Epicurean and Stoic philosophers, these were some of the philosophical mubalus of the day. And you would think that it'd be like, and dude, all of them, they just like hit their knees, and they like went to China and became missionaries, and it was awesome. See, I love the Bible, because it tells you the truth. What does it say? It says, and some said, what does this babbler wish to say? That's not a nice word. It means he just talks and says nothing. That he's a hack philosopher. He's a seed picker. That's what they were saying. But then others said, he seems to be a preacher of foreign divinities because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection. So they were saying, oh, well like Paul is going to add to our 30,000. He's like importing a new God. So they heard it, but they didn't really hear it. And then there was another group, 19. They took him and brought him to the Areopagus. So that was like a group of like 30 guys. And their job was basically to assess and then invite other people in to bring a new God in. And so they saw Paul as a business opportunity. They said, okay, so he's got this new idea. That probably means he has like some cash behind it. And he's going to come in and he's going to build this temple, like some jobs. And then it's also going to be like revenue. So yeah, let's give this guy a chance. I'm sure he's got something to say. So their motive wasn't even necessarily pure in this. But see, Paul was wise. And he was open-minded. And he said, look, hey, they may smell money on me that's not there. But man, this is an opportunity to preach the gospel to the influencers of the culture. And man, if God gives it to me, I'm going to step up and do it. Boom, 22. So Paul, standing in the midst of the Areopagus, said, "Men of Athens," and that's important. That's good missionary Paul right there, because that's the way Aristotle used to begin his addresses. They all respected him, so he's building common ground with them. He starts with what he can say, and then he affirms what he can. "I perceive that in every way you were very religious." And then here's the detail. "For as I passed along and observed the objects of your worship, I found an altar with this inscription: to the unknown God. What therefore you worship is unknown, this I proclaim to you." So he moves from this affirmation, "Look, I see that you're spiritual. This is a good thing. I'm on board with this," into proclamation. See, good proclaiming the gospel, it starts where people are. It starts where they are. But it doesn't leave them where they are. And friends, that's where some of us have gone wrong in our proclamation. Man, we're really good at building relationships. We're really good at speaking to people's need. But the problem comes in taking the next step. In calling that person that is in darkness out into the light. In speaking to that person that is steeped in sin and saying, "Hey, Savior." See, Paul could do that because he had an open mind. Can you do that? Can you do what Paul did? Hopefully what you're saying is, "I think so, but man, I don't know if I can do it just yet." Well, that's what we're here to do this weekend. And let me say this to you, friends. This matters. I mean, it really, really matters. You got that picture, fellas? This was my friend. His name was Dustin. So I had to like him, right? His name was Dustin. And you could tell this guy, he was really something else. Like that outfit that he's got on, some of you are like, "That's a little weird." Well, if you know what it's for, it's not weird at all. He's a cross-country runner. And dude, he was wicked fast. We were friends in high school, and I remember that every Monday morning, they would come on the PA system, and they would tell us it was going to be a great day at our school, and they would tell us what we were going to have for lunch, and I was always excited when it was pizza, but sometimes it was gross food. And then they would tell us how he did over the weekend. I mean, wicked fast. He would have been D1 runner. And this guy died when he was 17. He was killed in a car wreck. Just driving along one day. And here's the thing. I bet when he got up that morning, when he put the keys in the ignition, he was not thinking that today is going to be the day that I stand before God. I bet nobody in this room thought that today. But here's the deal. It happens. It happens when we least expect it. And the great news from this photo is that this guy named Dustin met Jesus about a year before he died. And man, he wasn't perfect, and there was stuff that he was working out. But he met Jesus. So when he died, he went to heaven to be with Jesus. And friends, when we think about these truths, they are of eternal importance. You need open eyes because there are Dustins in your school that are going to die this year. You need open hearts because there are people in your town that won't be there in 3 years. You need an open mouth because God, in his wisdom and providence, has chosen the foolishness of preaching, which includes this, but also includes you going to the people in your school. And you need an open mind to be able to think, okay, so how do I share the gospel in this situation with this person? Friends, we gotta get this right. It is of eternal significance. And here's where I want to start tonight. I want to ask you this question. Do you have a relationship with God through the gospel? Because if not, then we'll get to the proclaiming stuff later. But we got to settle this for you. Do you know Jesus? Do you have confidence that if something awful and tragic like happened to him happened to you, that you know you would go to heaven immediately to be in the presence of God? Friend, if not, we need to settle that tonight. Here's what I want us to do to wrap up this message. I want you to just close your eyes and let's just be as still as we can. Dave's going to come play a little music for us. And I want to give us some time to reflect in silence, even as he comes. First question, absolute clarity. Do you know Jesus Christ in a personal way? Has there been a time when, like Paul, you looked at your own self and you said, you know what? I am separated from God because of my sin. I'm a sinner by birth. I'm a sinner by choice. I'm separated from God. And my only hope is Jesus Christ. Not trying to be good, not trying to impress my parents or my youth workers. My only hope for heaven is Jesus Christ. And I believe that he is the Son of God who lived for me, who died for me, and who rose again for me. And that there has been a time when you would say, I have turned from my sins and I've trusted in that Jesus and I've been saved. If you can't say that with full assurance, and you would say, but you know what, Dustin? I want to meet Jesus tonight. Would you be bold and would you just stand up right where you are right now? Pull you down here, anything like that. I just want you to stand up just so you can say, I know where I'm at and I need to trust in Jesus. And your youth worker is going to just be able to see you so you guys can talk about that later. Is there anybody in that place tonight that would say, that's where I am and I want to talk to Jesus about it tonight? Go ahead and stand. If there's anybody in that place. All right, there's people standing up. Okay, youth workers, if you guys could be looking. Some kids standing up. Anybody else? Okay, you guys can have a seat. Next question. Appreciate you guys standing up. If you would say, you know what, Dustin? I know that I know Jesus, but I know that there are significant things in my life that are hindering me from proclaiming the gospel. And I don't even have to say what they are, because you know what I'm talking about, whatever it is. And you would say, I need to talk to somebody about this. It could be a pattern of sin that you're mired in. It could be something that happened to you that is causing you problems spiritually. Whatever it is. Same drill. Would you be bold when you stand, just so that the youth workers can see and so that you guys can connect up later? You would say, there's things in my life that I need to stand up and deal with. Okay? People are standing up. Appreciate that. Appreciate your boldness. Youth workers, if you guys can be watching. Okay. Anybody else? All right. You guys have a seat. Last question tonight. Maybe you've heard what we talked about, and you would say, you know what? I want to do this, man. I want to do it. Like, I get it. I get why it matters. I get it's of eternal importance. But I'm just so scared. It just freaks me out to think about talking about Jesus to other people. Would you be bold and would you stand up tonight and just say, you know what, I just want to acknowledge that, and I want my youth worker to know that, because I want to grow in my boldness. Anybody in that boat? Just afraid? You want people to pray for you? That's what we're going to do. Okay? People standing up. Youth workers, if you guys could be watching. Anybody else? All right. You guys have a seat. Thank you. Well, let's do this. Let's all pray together. and then I'm going to dismiss us check-in, and we can talk about these things. And let me say this, guys, for all of you who stood up, and even for those who maybe wanted to stand up and you didn't, man, you have a unique opportunity in the next 2 days where you're away from a lot of stuff that distracts you. And you got youth workers here, you got me here, you got people in yellow shirts here. Man, we want to help you spiritually any way that we can. And that's what we want to do. All right, so let's pray. And let's wrap it up. God, we are thankful that you are at work among us. Lord, I pray for those who tonight, just right off the bat, they are understanding that they are separated from you and connected to you. I pray that they would follow through, that they would talk to their youth workers, and that tonight they would meet Jesus. Lord, I also pray for those who just recognize that there's a disconnect in their lives that is hurting their proclamation of the gospel. Would you help them make that connection, Lord? That they would talk to their youth workers, that they would get some support, that life change would begin tonight for them. And God, finally, would you be with those that are afraid? Lord, I know exactly what that's like. And I pray for my friends that they would grow in their boldness, that they would see their brothers and sisters as allies in this commission that you've given us. And God, that you would help them, that they would be encouraged, not discouraged, and that we would walk together towards you. Lord, we thank you for your word. We thank you for your work. And we pray that you would be with us tonight and throughout the camp. We pray all these things in Jesus' name.